Welcome to our channel. Today we're talking about the book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender by David R. Hawkins.
Yeah, this book really digs deep into the idea that we can transform our lives, like completely transform our lives just by releasing negative emotions.
It really is a powerful concept, especially when you consider Dr. Hawkins' background. I mean, he's both a psychiatrist and a spiritual teacher.
Absolutely.
It lends a lot of weight to what he's saying.
Hmm.
What struck me was how he frames surrender. It's not about giving up.
Right.
It's this active process of aligning with a higher power and really like a way to tap into our natural state of peace and joy.
It is a very fascinating perspective. And he argues that, negative feelings
Mm.
like fear or anger or resentment,
Yeah.
those are actually blocks that prevent us from experiencing those higher states of consciousness.
And he even uses, this tool called the map of consciousness to illustrate this point.
Yes.
It's basically a scale that maps out different emotional states and their corresponding energy levels.
Right. It's a really great visual representation of how moving from, let's say, guilt to courage represents a huge leap in our energetic vibration.
And I found it really insightful how he connected our thoughts to our emotions, suggesting that if you release the underlying feeling, the thoughts just dissolve.
It makes you think, how often are we trying to manage our thoughts without addressing the root cause, the emotion that's driving them? And, he uses a lot of compelling examples from his practice to demonstrate this, like the story of the man who lost his passport.
Oh, yeah, that was a great illustration of how surrender can lead to unexpected solutions.
Exactly, exactly. He was, frantically searching, convinced it was lost. But when he finally identified the underlying feeling, where it was grief over a potential separation from a loved one, and surrendered it, he immediately remembered where he put it.
That's so interesting. It makes you wonder, sometimes our frantic searching is more about avoiding the real feeling underneath.
Exactly. And Dr. Hawkins argues that all those avoidance tactics, whether it's denial or projection, escaping into distractions, it only prolongs our suffering.
So by facing those emotions head on and surrendering them,
Yeah,
we're actually taking a step towards freedom.
absolutely. And not just emotional freedom. The book highlights how letting go can positively impact, every area of our lives, our physical and mental health, even our relationships and our creativity.
And he even shares his own healing journey
Yes.
as an example, showing how he overcame a really serious illness just by applying these principles.
It's remarkable how he connects the dots between our emotional state and our overall well-being.
Yeah. And the book doesn't just leave us with theory. I mean, it actually provides practical techniques for applying surrender in daily life, like, dealing with conflict or overcoming fear and anxiety, even approaching success and achievement in a whole new way.
And it challenges a lot of our conventional thinking, encouraging us to move away from that struggle and strive mentality and align with a more effortless flow.
Speaking of aligning with a more positive flow, if you're looking for additional resources to support your personal growth, I highly recommend checking out the Affirmifyjourney YouTube channel.
It's a fantastic resource for cultivating a more positive and empowered mindset.
Now back to letting go. I think what makes this book so compelling is that it offers a path not to just feeling better, but to actually reaching higher levels of consciousness.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that surrender is not about weakness, or giving up. It's about aligning with a power greater than ourselves.
It almost feels paradoxical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like letting go is what actually gives us more power.
That's the beauty of it. Dr. Hawkins emphasizes that this process allows us to tap into the love, joy, and peace that are already our natural state, those qualities that are often overshadowed by the ego's fears and anxieties.
So it's about recognizing that our true essence is already whole and complete.
Exactly.
One of the areas where I found this concept of surrender particularly relevant was in relationships.
Yeah, relationships can be such fertile ground for practicing letting go.
Absolutely. Dr. Hawkins suggests that much of the conflict we experience stems from our own unwillingness to surrender, our need to be right or to control the other person.
And our need to control can be so strong.
And he shares this story of a woman who was struggling after a divorce,
Oh.
surrounded by other divorced women who were harboring bitterness and resentment.
It highlights how our environment and the people we surround ourselves with, they can either support or hinder our growth.
Yeah, and he actually encouraged her to start spending time with people who had successful, happy relationships even after a divorce.
Right.
And simply being in that more positive environment shifted her perspective.
Yeah. It's amazing how even subtle shifts in our surroundings can impact our internal state.
So powerful. And he emphasizes the power of our social circles, the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who uplift us.
It's like choosing to nourish ourselves with positive energy rather than getting stuck in all that negativity. Now, while relationships offer this powerful arena for practicing surrender, it's also crucial in navigating fear and anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. And he uses the case of Betty to illustrate how fear, if left unaddressed, can completely take over our lives.
Betty's story, with her escalating phobias, is a powerful example of how fear can start small and gradually expand until it just feels overwhelming.
It started with a germ phobia, then escalated to a fear of cancer, air pollution, muggers, even swallowing pills. She became a prisoner in her own home.
It's a stark reminder that unaddressed fear can create limitations we might not even be aware of until it's too late.
But Dr. Hawkins' approach offers a way out.
Yes, he does.
He emphasizes the power of acknowledging the fear, accepting it without judgment, and then just being willing to let it go. And through this process, Betty was able to reclaim her freedom. It demonstrates that surrender isn't just about passive acceptance.
Right.
It's about taking courageous action.
Absolutely. It's about reclaiming our power from the grip of fear.
And this process, this willingness to face our fears and let them go, that applies to any fear that holds us back, not just phobias.
Right. It's about recognizing that we have a choice.
Right.
We can let fear control us, or we can choose to face it and move through it.
And speaking of facing challenging emotions, the book also delves into grief and loss, a universal human experience that can be incredibly difficult to navigate.
Absolutely. He addresses those common reactions to grief, fear of loss, the denial, the anger, and offers a different perspective.
Instead of clinging to those difficult emotions, he encourages us to accept the temporary nature of all things.
Including life itself.
Yeah, he uses the example of losing a beloved dog to illustrate this point, suggesting that, we contemplate the dog's role in our lives, the love, companionship, the joy it brought, and ask ourselves if those needs will truly go unfulfilled after its passing.
It's not about minimizing the pain of loss, but about approaching it with greater awareness and acceptance.
And he emphasizes that holding on to grief through denial or anger only prolongs the suffering.
Letting go, on the other hand, allows for healing and peace.
It's about recognizing that all things are impermanent and finding a way to make peace with that reality.
And this brings us to a fascinating topic: success and achievement.
Yes.
The book really encourages us to shift our perspective, moving away from that struggle and strive mentality that's so prevalent in our culture.
I think it's very prevalent, yeah.
And he suggests that by aligning with a natural flow of abundance, we can actually achieve our goals with greater ease and fulfillment.
That's interesting. So much of what we see out there is about hustle and grind.
Exactly.
Push yourself to the limit.
He shares the story of a man who desperately wanted an apartment in New York City, but he was having no luck finding anything suitable.
It's easy to get caught up in that feeling of desperation when we really want something.
Exactly. And that desperation often becomes a block.
I could see that.
He was putting so much pressure on himself to find the perfect place, constantly worrying and searching.
So it sounds like it was that very desire that was blocking him.
Exactly. And when he finally surrendered his attachment to the outcome, something amazing happened.
What happened?
His brother-in-law called,
Ah,
saying that a friend was looking to sublet an apartment in New York City.
okay.
And guess what? It was the perfect place, reasonably priced, in a great location, everything he had ever wanted.
Wow. It's like the universe conspired to help him once he let go of his need to control the outcome.
Exactly. The story highlights how surrender can lead to unexpected solutions and a sense of ease in achieving our goals.
It's about shifting our internal state from one of lack and striving to one of trust and abundance.
Precisely. And this concept can be applied to, all sorts of goals, not just material ones. Think about career aspirations, creative pursuits, even personal growth goals.
So it's really about when we release our tight grip on the outcome and surrender to a higher power, we open ourselves to possibilities we might never have imagined.
Exactly. The book even challenges our conventional notions of ambition.
Yeah. Instead of grinding away, sacrificing our well-being in the pursuit of success, Dr. Hawkins suggests a gentler approach, aligning with our true purpose, letting go of those ego-driven motivations, and embracing the natural flow of abundance.
It's such a radical departure from the hustle culture mentality that's so pervasive these days.
It really is. But it also feels incredibly liberating, doesn't it? to release that pressure and just trust that we're being guided toward what's truly meant for us.
Absolutely. And this brings us to, I think, an important point that Dr. Hawkins makes about the nature of emotions.
Yeah, okay.
He suggests that all negative feelings at their core are rooted in fear.
It's a profound insight, isn't it?
Yeah.
So whether it's anger or resentment, jealousy or grief, they all stem from this sense of lack, a fear of not having what we need or losing what we have.
Exactly. He uses the example of a woman who constantly sabotages her relationships, complaining that they never work out.
Oh yeah, the self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a classic case of a self-fulfilling prophecy. By holding on to this belief that she's destined for relationship failure, she unconsciously creates the conditions for it to happen.
And that applies to so many areas of life. Our fears, whether conscious or unconscious, they often manifest in our reality.
It's as if our minds are like these powerful magnets, attracting the very things we fear the most.
But here's the empowering part. Dr. Hawkins argues that by recognizing and surrendering these fears, we can break free from their grip.
Absolutely.
And it's not about denying or suppressing our feelings, but about acknowledging them, accepting them, and being willing to let them go.
Exactly.
And this process of letting go is not a one-time event, is it? It's an ongoing practice, a commitment to showing up for ourselves with compassion and awareness.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we are not our thoughts or emotions, but the consciousness that observes them.
Right. And from that place of awareness, we have the power to choose how we respond.
And the more we practice surrender, the more we cultivate a sense of inner peace and freedom. Our lives become less about reacting to external circumstances and more about aligning with our true nature.
Exactly. It's like shedding layers of conditioning, revealing the radiant being we are at our core.
And this process of self-discovery, this journey of letting go, it can be incredibly rewarding.
It can. It's not always easy, but it's worth the effort, because ultimately it leads us to a place of greater joy, love, and fulfillment.
And speaking of fulfillment, let's take a closer look at how surrender can transform our experience of sexuality. This is the topic that Dr. Hawkins addresses with surprising candor and insight.
He really does. He challenges many of our conventional beliefs about sex, suggesting that it's not just about physical pleasure or fulfilling biological urges.
Right.
He argues that our sexual experiences are a reflection of our overall state of consciousness.
So if we're carrying a lot of baggage, fear, guilt, shame, those emotions are inevitably going to show up in the bedroom.
It makes sense. He shares this compelling story of a couple who transformed their sexual relationship through surrender. They were initially struggling with issues of control, performance anxiety, a lack of genuine connection.
Right. But as they began to let go of their fears and expectations, something magical happened.
What happened?
Their lovemaking became more spontaneous, more playful, and deeply, deeply fulfilling.
I love that. And the woman in the story described it as a shift from trying to get to wanting to give.
And in that act of selfless giving, she discovered this profound sense of joy and connection.
It's beautiful. They were no longer focused on their own individual needs, but on the shared experience of love and intimacy.
And this, according to Dr. Hawkins, is the key to unlocking the true potential of sexuality.
It's about moving beyond those ego-driven desires and embracing a more expansive, heart-centered approach.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that surrender in this context is not about becoming passive or submissive.
Okay.
It's about letting go of control, allowing ourselves to be fully present in the moment, and trusting the wisdom of our bodies.
So when we do that, we open ourselves to a level of pleasure and connection that transcends the purely physical.
It becomes a spiritual experience, a celebration of the union between two souls.
And this transformation in the bedroom, it can have a ripple effect throughout our lives.
Absolutely. As we cultivate greater intimacy and connection with our partners, we also deepen our connection to ourselves and to the world around us.
It's like an energetic expansion, a widening of our capacity for love and joy.
Exactly. And this brings us to an important point that Dr. Hawkins makes about the role of surrender in success and achievement.
Okay.
He challenges the conventional notion that success requires this constant striving and sacrifice.
It's common belief. We're often told to work harder, push ourselves to the limit.
Exactly. But he suggests that by aligning with a higher power, we can actually achieve our goals with greater ease and fulfillment.
It's a different perspective for sure.
He emphasizes the importance of letting go of those ego-driven motivations, like the need for recognition or validation.
Right, those external markers of success.
Exactly. These desires, he argues, often stem from a sense of lack. a belief that we're not enough as we are.
And when we operate from that place of lack, we create a constant state of striving and dissatisfaction.
We're always chasing the next achievement, never truly feeling content.
So Dr. Hawkins is offering a different path, one based on trust, surrender, and alignment with our true purpose.
Exactly. He shares inspiring examples of people who achieved remarkable success, by surrendering their ego-driven ambitions and embracing a more heart-centered approach.
That's powerful. What did they discover?
They discovered that true fulfillment comes not from external achievements, but from aligning with their soul's purpose and serving a greater good.
And that shift in perspective can be transformative, not just in our careers, but in all areas of life.
It's about recognizing that we're not limited by our past experiences or beliefs.
We have the power to choose a different path.
One based on love, compassion, and surrender to a higher power.
And as we embark on this journey of letting go, we may be surprised by the synchronicities and opportunities that unfold.
Absolutely. It's as if the universe conspires to support our highest good when we align with our true nature.
And this brings us to an important question. How do we actually practice surrender in our daily lives?
It's a question that so many people ask, and Dr. Hawkins provides some practical guidance.
Okay, I'm curious to hear what he suggests.
Well, he emphasizes that surrender is not a passive state of resignation, but an active choice to align with a higher power.
So it's about cultivating a willingness to let go of our ego's grip on our thoughts, emotions, and desires.
Exactly, and he suggests starting small, like surrendering to a traffic jam or a delayed flight.
Oh, those little everyday annoyances.
Exactly. It's about noticing the resistance that arises in those moments and choosing to release it.
Okay.
And as we practice with these smaller annoyances, we build our capacity to surrender to bigger challenges.
It's like building a muscle.
Exactly. He also recommends cultivating a daily practice of letting go of any negative feelings that have accumulated throughout the day.
So this could involve things like journaling, meditation, or just taking a few moments to consciously breathe and release any tension or stress.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that the key to surrender is not about achieving a state of perfection, but about cultivating an ongoing awareness of our thoughts and emotions and choosing to align with love and peace.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly.
Now, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I want to acknowledge that the idea of surrendering the ego can be a bit daunting for some people.
It is a radical concept, isn't it? Letting go of the very thing that we've been conditioned to identify with.
Exactly.
But Dr. Hawkins emphasizes that the ego is not our enemy. It's simply a part of us that needs to be understood and integrated.
Okay.
He suggests viewing the ego as a young child, innocent and well-intentioned, but lacking in wisdom and maturity.
That's a helpful analogy.
And just as we wouldn't scold a child for making mistakes, we can approach our own ego with compassion and understanding.
Okay.
By recognizing its limitations and choosing to align with a higher power, we can gently guide the ego towards its rightful place as a servant of the soul.
So it's not about eradicating the ego, but about transforming its energy into a force for good.
Exactly. And this process of transformation can be incredibly liberating.
It can.
We begin to experience a sense of peace and freedom that transcends the ups and downs of everyday life.
Our relationships become more harmonious, our work becomes more fulfilling, and we tap into this wellspring of creativity and inspiration.
And this, according to Dr. Hawkins, is the true meaning of letting go, discovering the boundless joy and love that reside within us, waiting to be unleashed.
And in this episode, we've covered a lot of ground. From understanding the nature of emotions and the mechanisms of surrender to exploring the benefits of letting go and practical ways to apply it in daily life.
Absolutely. We've delved into Dr. Hawkins's insights on relationships, fear and anxiety, grief and loss, and even the transformative power of surrender in our experience of success, sexuality, and our connection to a higher purpose.
And while we've touched on many key points, this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely.
We encourage you to explore letting go, the pathway of surrender yourself, for a deeper dive into these profound concepts.
It's a book that offers a wealth of wisdom and practical guidance for anyone seeking to live a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
And as we move into the second part of this deep dive, we'll continue to unpack the nuances of surrender and explore its implications for personal growth, spiritual awakening, and creating a more harmonious world.
We'll also delve into the challenges and rewards of this journey and offer practical tips for integrating surrender into your daily life.
So stay tuned for part 2, where we continue our exploration of letting go, the pathway of surrender.
And until then, May you find moments of peace and clarity as you contemplate the power of letting go. It's interesting how Dr. Hawkins tackles this common misconception about surrender, that it means giving up on your goals, your ambitions.
I think a lot of people struggle with that. They kind of equate surrender with some kind of passive resignation.
Exactly. But he's very clear that it's not about giving up on our goals, but surrendering that attached struggle, the feeling that we have to force things to happen.
So instead of white-knuckling it, we're learning to trust a more effortless flow, allowing things to unfold more organically.
Precisely. And this applies to any area of life, like careers, creative pursuits, even personal growth. Imagine approaching your work with a sense of ease and enjoyment rather than constantly chasing a promotion out of fear or insecurity.
It almost feels counterintuitive in our achievement-oriented culture.
Yeah.
Letting go of that striving and trusting that the right opportunities will emerge naturally.
It does challenge the prevailing narrative, but what if by releasing that need to control, we actually open ourselves up to a more fulfilling path, one that aligns with our true purpose?
It reminds me of that saying, the muse favors the prepared mind. When we create space for inspiration, it seems to flow more effortlessly.
Exactly. And this brings us to another area where surrender can be incredibly transformative: personal growth. Often we approach self-improvement with this idea that we need to fix ourselves,
Yeah.
that there's something inherently wrong with
That we're
us.
constantly striving for this elusive ideal of perfection.
And that creates so much internal pressure and self-judgment. Dr. Hawkins suggests a gentler approach, one based on acceptance and surrender.
So instead of beating ourselves up for our perceived flaws, we acknowledge them with compassion and then let them go.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. It's about recognizing that we're already whole and complete, even with our imperfections. This journey of self-discovery isn't about becoming someone else, but uncovering our true nature.
It's about stripping away those layers of conditioning and embracing who we truly are.
It's a process of becoming more authentically ourselves.
One of the most inspiring aspects of Dr. Hawkins' book is how he positions surrender not just as a personal practice, but as a pathway to a more peaceful and harmonious world.
He believes that individual transformation has a ripple effect, impacting the collective consciousness.
So as more people embrace surrender, we create a more peaceful and compassionate society.
Precisely. Our individual journeys contribute to a larger transformation of humanity. It's an inspiring vision, isn't it?
It really is. And it makes you realize the potential power of each individual's commitment to this practice.
And this leads to another crucial point Dr. Hawkins makes. Surrender is not about becoming passive or complacent.
Right. It's not about just rolling over and letting life happen to us.
Exactly. It's about aligning with a higher power, tapping into our inner wisdom, and taking inspired action.
So it's a dynamic process, like finding that balance between acceptance and action.
Yes. And this can be seen in how Dr. Hawkins encourages us to approach challenging situations, even conflicts in relationships.
So instead of engaging in power struggles or trying to control the other person,
He suggests surrendering our own need to be right, creating space for understanding and compassion to emerge.
it's about recognizing that there's often more than one perspective, more than one right way of seeing things.
It's about being willing to step back from our own ego's need to win.
I can imagine that's easier said than done, especially in the heat of the moment.
It definitely takes practice, but when we can let go of those rigid positions, we create space for genuine dialogue and connection.
And from that space, solutions that benefit everyone involved can arise more organically.
It's not about compromising our values, but about approaching the situation with a more open and flexible mindset.
It's interesting how Dr. Hawkins connects surrender to the physical realm as well, sharing stories about how releasing negative emotions led to improvements in his own physical health.
Yeah, he even talks about healing his vision through surrender, highlighting the profound interconnectedness between our mind, body, and spirit.
It makes you realize the power of our thoughts and emotions and how they impact our physical well-being in ways we might not even realize.
It challenges us to pay attention to our inner landscape and the impact it has on our overall health.
And this leads us to another area where surrender can be transformative: our relationship with money. I mean, that's a big one for so many people.
Absolutely. Dr. Hawkins points out that our financial situations often mirror our internal state.
So if we're carrying around a lot of fear or scarcity around money, that's likely to manifest in our external reality.
Exactly. But when we surrender those fears and limiting beliefs, we open ourselves to a flow of abundance. It's about shifting our perspective from one of lack and anxiety to one of trust and flow,
It's not about denying the importance of money, but transforming our relationship with it.
from one of grasping and control to one of allowing and receiving.
And that shift can be incredibly liberating,
Yeah.
freeing us to experience greater joy and freedom in all areas of life.
It's about recognizing that true abundance comes not from what we have, but from who we are, from our internal state of being.
While Dr. Hawkins is a strong advocate for surrender, he's also very realistic about the challenges involved.
He doesn't sugarcoat it. He acknowledges that letting go of the ego's grip can be difficult, even uncomfortable at times.
It's a process, not a quick fix.
Exactly. It requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to keep showing up for ourselves even when we stumble.
But he also emphasizes the immense rewards that await us on the other side of surrender.
A deeper sense of peace, joy, love, and connection qualities that are inherent to our true nature.
And those rewards make the journey worthwhile.
It's about coming home to ourselves, to the truth of who we really are. And that's a journey worth taking.
As we've been discussing these ideas, I've been thinking about my own experiences with surrender and how it's played out in my life, particularly with my fear of public speaking.
Oh, I'm curious to hear about that. Public speaking is like a common fear for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was crippling for me for years. My heart would race, my palms would sweat, and my mind would just go blank whenever I had to speak in front of a group.
I can relate. I used to get terrible stage fright myself.
But then I came across Dr. Hawkins' book, and something just clicked for me.
What resonated with you?
His emphasis on surrendering the ego. I realized that my fear was rooted in this need to control how others perceived me, a fear of making a mistake or appearing foolish.
The classic trap of the ego, wanting to maintain a certain image.
Exactly. So I decided to try an experiment. The next time I had to give a presentation, I focused on surrendering my need to control the outcome. I did my best to prepare, and then I just let go.
And what happened?
It was amazing. The fear didn't completely disappear, but it was manageable. I felt a sense of calm and presence that I had never experienced before.
That's the power of surrender, allowing us to access a deeper level of peace and strength within ourselves.
And as I continued to practice surrender in other areas of my life, I noticed that my fear of public speaking gradually diminished. It's still there sometimes, but it no longer has the same power over me.
It's a testament to the transformative power of this practice, how it can ripple out into different areas of our lives.
And it's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. It's given me a sense of freedom and empowerment that I never thought possible.
It's inspiring to hear how Dr. Hawkins' work has had such a profound impact on your life.
And I know I'm not alone. There are countless people around the world who have benefited from his teachings.
It speaks to the universality of these principles, how they resonate with something deep within us, something that yearns for freedom, peace, and connection.
And as we continue to explore these ideas, I want to encourage everyone listening to reflect on their own experiences with surrender. What's worked for you? What challenges have you encountered? And how can you integrate this practice more fully into your daily life?
Because ultimately, the journey of letting go is an ongoing one.
It's a lifelong commitment to waking up to the truth of who we are and living from a place of love, wisdom, and surrender.
And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I'd like to emphasize that there's no one right way to approach this practice. It's a deeply personal journey.
So we encourage you to do your own research, read other books on surrender, and find what resonates with you.
And remember, the most important thing is to approach this practice with an open mind and a willingness to experiment.
Because ultimately, the journey of letting go is about discovering what works for you and integrating these principles into your own unique life experience.
And on that note, we'll wrap up the second part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of letting go, the pathway of surrender, by David R. Hawkins.
In this last part, I want to touch on what Dr. Hawkins describes as like the ultimate surrender, surrendering the ego itself.
Ooh, this is where it gets really interesting. What does that even mean? To surrender the ego? It sounds almost paradoxical.
It is. It's about recognizing that the ego, with all its fears, desires, and that need for control, it's not who we truly are.
Okay.
It's a construct. Just a collection of beliefs and stories that we've accumulated over time.
So it's like letting go of the illusion of self, the image we've created for ourselves.
Exactly. And it's not easy. The ego, it really clings to its existence.
It does.
But Dr. Hawkins suggests that through consistent practice of surrender, we can loosen its grip and allow our true self to emerge.
So what does that true self look like, according to Dr. Hawkins?
He describes it as this state of pure awareness, free from the limitations of the ego. It's a place of peace, joy, and
It
interconnectedness.
sounds almost like mystical.
It can be.
Yeah.
But he emphasizes that this state, it isn't something we achieve through, like efforting.
Yeah.
It's our natural state, simply obscured by layers of conditioning.
So surrender is about peeling back those layers to reveal who we already are at our core.
Precisely. And as we do that, our lives, they really transform. Our relationships become more authentic, our work becomes more meaningful, and, we experience a deeper sense of purpose.
It's interesting, Dr. Hawkins himself went through this period of intense reclusiveness, like dedicating himself to meditation and study.
Yeah, it's a theme we see in a lot of spiritual traditions. Withdrawing from the world to go inward.
But then eventually he returned, sharing his insights and helping others on their own paths.
And that, I think, is like a beautiful expression of surrender, using our experiences to serve a greater good.
It's recognizing that we're all interconnected and our individual journeys have this ripple effect on the world.
Exactly. Dr. Hawkins also makes an important point about the connection between surrender and love.
He sees them as deeply intertwined, right?
Absolutely. He describes love as the natural outflow of a surrendered heart. When we let go of the ego's need to control and possess, we open ourselves up to a love that's boundless, unconditional.
A love that embraces all beings, flaws and all.
Exactly. And this love has the power to heal, to transform, and to create a more harmonious world.
As we've been discussing these ideas, I've been reflecting on how surrender plays out in everyday life. And it seems like a really powerful tool for navigating challenges.
How so?
Well, when we're faced with difficulties, our instinct is often to resist, to fight against what's happening.
Right. That's the ego trying to maintain control.
But that resistance often creates more suffering. Surrender, on the other hand, allows us to soften and accept the situation, finding a path through it with more ease and grace.
It's like going with the flow of a river instead of trying to swim upstream.
Exactly. And I think surrender can be particularly helpful in relationships. When we let go of the need to be right or control the other person, we create space for deeper understanding and connection.
It's about truly seeing the other person, honoring their perspective, even if we don't agree.
So that can be incredibly challenging. But I think it's crucial for building strong, loving relationships.
Absolutely. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm really struck by the simplicity of surrender.
Yeah, it's not about complicated techniques or rituals.
It's about a willingness to let go, to trust, and to open ourselves up to something greater.
And that's something anyone can practice, regardless of their background or beliefs.
It's a universal principle available to everyone.
And, as you continue exploring this concept, remember you don't have to do it alone. There's a wealth of resources out there, including lingopediamagazine.com, which offers courses and ebooks for personal growth and self-discovery.
It's a great place to kind of dive deeper into these ideas and find support on your journey.
And of course, if you found this deep dive valuable, please subscribe, share, and like this podcast so we can continue to bring you insightful content.
Absolutely. We hope you've gained some valuable insights from our exploration of letting go, the pathway of surrender.
Remember, the path of surrender is always open to you. It's about taking small steps each day to release what no longer serves you and, open yourself to the infinite possibilities that await.
May you find peace, joy, and liberation in the practice of letting go.